ja saka čau, tad laikam jāsāk.
We have to start. Good morning. My name is Angelita Kamenska. Unfortunately, we will not be able to observe this wonderful view all the time because of the fact that there is a big interest in the conference, and the topic is very interesting for the people, and the conference is streamlined both in English and in Latvian. And if somebody has not been able to join us here, people are very welcome to join us online. Oh, well, the screens are not necessary, so you will be able to view the wonderful view outside. And for the opening of the conference, I'm giving the floor to Erika Stiliņa, the Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Interior and the advisor to the Ministry of Interior.
Labrīt.
Good morning. I'm very glad to see so many in the audience.
Experts, welcome you all in Latvia. Probably my next speech will be in Latvian. Liels.
I'm very glad to see you all. Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. I was very honored to be chosen to be the person to introduce the conference today. For me personally, this is a very topical issue in the context of today's political events. Today, this is a very topical topic in Latvia: effective approaches in addressing hate crimes and hate speech. Topics of hate speech are very topical not only in Europe but also in a larger scale and in the social networks. The refugee topic has been discussed very much. The comments in internet are on the verge of violating the freedom of speech. And this freedom of speech is not unlimited, and very often comments are violating the freedom of speech, and we will be discussing this at the conference. The freedom of speech can be evaluated only and used only if we can protect human rights as a balance. Last year in the summer, we were discussing very much the hate crime topic, and we were discussing the new criminal law articles, and in very heated discussions we adopted 2 amendments in the criminal law, in the penal law, in the article 150 on the instigation of social hatred and enmity, and also we were amending this article 74(1). And these amendments is a step forward in our policy in the abolishing hate crime in Latvia. But it is important to involve the law enforcement institutions and also train the officers in correct interpretation and in application in practice. We also need to educate NGOs and use the NGOs' resources, which are huge resources, to eradicate the hate crime. And this is why I'm very proud of the 2014's 23rd December cooperation agreement, which has been signed between the OSCE and institutions in Latvia, and we have had already a couple of seminars on hate crime in Latvia, the knowledge acquired there will be disseminated further. The law enforcement training is very important, and we need to put a solid basis for the everyday work against hate crime and hate speech. And to understand the essence of the hate speech, we need to be able not to work against specific hate speech crimes, but also to understand the components of this crime in other criminal activities. And this is not a very advanced sphere in Latvia today, and this is why I wish that the conference provides for wonderful opportunity of cooperation, of exchange of experience, and the experience and exchange and cooperation is the key words for our further work in this field. Thank you to Mrs. Sillingham, because this is very positive development, because in a way we sometimes think that things do not develop, that the law is not complete, but it is very important that we have this section 150 in our law, in our criminal law. Probably it is not a very all-embracing section, but I think that it will be developing in the practice. And this is very positive that we also have this agreement with OSCE, cooperation with OSCE, and we also had an opportunity to participate in the training there. And as far as I understand, that in Lithuania, they only start the developing of cooperation with the OSCE, and we haven't heard much about Estonia yet. I'm giving the floor to Agnes Cimdiņa. She is the advisor to the Norwegian Royal Norwegian Embassy, advisor to the ambassador.
It would be Latvian, so I will have my speech in Latvian as well. Paldies, Angelita.
Thank you, Angelita, for inviting me to introduce this conference on very topical issue. EA Norway grants is one of my main tasks in the Norwegian Embassy. I work with them, and this is why I'm here today. Hate speech and hate crime is a very topical issue. Both Norway and Latvia and European countries in general have undertaken to abolish and struggle against hate speech, hate crime. And unfortunately, lately we had a lot of hate speech instances, and which testifies that there is intolerance to other groups for different reasons, for different reasons. And the Human Rights Court uses the hate speech definition, which includes also the intolerance which arises from aggressive nationalism and hate against migrants and foreign people of foreign origin. Do we view and see our society in the definition of hate speech and hate crime? And unfortunately, yes, especially in the context of the migrant crisis in Europe. Hate crime is inflicting many negative things, not only to the people which are suffering from the aggression, but also for the society at large. Norway and Liechtenstein are very strongly standing against the hate crime, hate speech, and they want to foster the equality. The right to the equality is the basis of the Norwegian financial instrument. European Economic Area, EA Norway grants, are partners to the European Council's movement, Hate Speech No, which try to encourage young people in their struggle against the hate speech in internet. We were organizing the video conference for young people against hate speech. They were sending their videos, their films, where they reflect on the hate speech risks and demonstrations of hate speech. There was a winner of this competition. The competition also showed that young people are interested in this topic, but there were unfortunately only about 15 participants in this film competition. We are also dealing with NGOs. NGO programs in Latvia include the program which is also guided by Society's Integration Fund, and the total funding is 160 million euro for strengthening of the civil society and providing for the long-term development, sustainable development. And Norway, with this, becomes one of the most important donors for the civil society at large and in Latvia as well. The demand for the funding in Latvia has been high. More than 1,000 project proposals were submitted to the Society Integration Fund, and more than 200 projects were approved, which means that the civil society in Latvia is active, which is a very good sign, because NGOs are very important for the strengthening of civil society and including the unprotected groups. This is how there is the struggle to discrimination enforced in Latvia. Norway grants would provide for substantial contribution in this field, and we would like to thank the Latvian Center for Human Rights for organizing this conference. Latvian Center for Human Rights is a very important, active player in this field, and please use your experience, knowledge to foster the social dialogue and enhance the equality in Latvia.
Latvijas nevalstiskais sektors var būt pateicīgs Islandē, Lichtenšteinai un Norvēģijai. Es nezinu, teiksim, nevalstiskās organizācijas ir tik ļoti ne tikai projekti, bet NVO eksistence ir tik ļoti atkarīga no šīs te grantu schēmas. Bet, kā es saprotu, tad ir arī cerības, ka Latvijas valdība varētu kaut kad veidot NVO fondu un kad arī Latvija nākotnē atbalstīt nevalstiskās organizācijas. Varbūt es īsi paturpināšu jau iesākto, kā jau jūs dzirdējāt, tad atbalstītais projekts ir plašāks. Tā nav tikai šodienas konference, bet mēs arī esam organizējuši apmācības jauniešiem, 3 dienu apmācības, tāds apmācību kurs izstrādāts par kā identificēt naidu runu internetā. Tur mums arī ļoti ir palīdzējuši mūsu sadarbības partneri Vācijā Jugendschutz, kuriem ir milzīga pieredze. Mums liekas, ka mums te ir šausmas ar komentāriem. Viņi ik gadu monitorē 5500 neonacistu vietnes. man liekas, tas ir, un viņiem ir uzkrāta milzīga pieredze, un viņi ir, teiksim, mums palīdzējuši bieži vien, mācījuši par tehniskajiem risinājumiem. Šī projekta ietvaros arī mums top materiāls par antisemītismu, jo mēs konstatējām, ka, lai gan ir pētniecība veikta, tomēr tāda materiāla, viegli uztverama, interesanta, plašākai sabiedrībai nav. Tā kā tas drīzumā būs arī pieejams internetā. Mēs arī esam, jūsu mapītēs ir materiāls, kuru mēs esam mēģinājuši ņemot vērā, kad Latvijā 2012. un 2013. gadā bija Starptautiskas konference, ko rīkoja Rīgas juridiskā augstskola un ārlietu ministrija. Un arī ir arī, zinām, literatūra ir pieejama latviski. Mēs gribējām identificēt tās pēdējās tendences gan Eiropas Savienībā, gan kas attiecas uz Eiropas Savienības dalību valstīs, gan kas attiecas uz likumdošanu, gan datu vākšanu, viktimizācijas aptaujas. Tā kā tas arī ir materiāls pieejams mapītēs, un mēs arī saprotam, ka Latvijā bieži vien aktuāli ir tiesas spriedumu, Eiropas cilvēktiesību tiesas spriedumu pieejamība latviešu valodā. Un šī projekta ietvaros sadarbībā ar ministru kabinetu pārstāvu starptautiskajās cilvēktiesību institūcijās ir iztulkoti 4 spriedumi, kuriem ir tieši saistība ar rasu diskrimināciju un naida runu. Visi šie spriedumi ir pieejami augstākās tiesas mājaslapā. Un tādi kopsavilkumi arī jūsu mapītēs. Laikam ar ievadu, tā kā mēs būtu tikušas galā, un es tagad gribētu lūgt Paulu Iganskiju. Es nezinu, kā jūs iesiet prom, vai paliksiet, vai... Bet es jūs nedzenu projām. Lai... Es atvainojos. Lai arī ir bijušas konferences, kurās un apmācības, kurās ir daudz stāstīts par naida noziegumu īpašo dabu, ņemot vērā, ka mūsu auditorijā, šodienas auditorijā ir pietiekami daudz cilvēku, kuri varbūt nav iepazīstināti ar šādiem jautājumiem. Mēs uzskatījām par nepieciešamu vēlreiz atgādināt cilvēkiem, ar ko tad šie naida noziegumi atšķiras no parastajiem noziegumiem. Un esam priecīgi, kad Latvijā ir ieradies profesors Pauls Iganskijs. Viņš gan pēc dabas ir ļoti pieticīgs, bet ja jūs, un par sevi droši vien, sevi pārāk daudz neliela, bet, ja jūs skatāties literatūru par naida noziegumiem angļu valodā, tad viņa vārds ir viens no pirmajiem, kas izlec. Tā kā, tā kā esam tiešām pateicīgi, kad Paul ir atradis laiku ierasties Latvijā. Un varbūt īsi mazliet par sevi, un tad prezentācija.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I apologize for not speaking Latvian. I have to say I don't speak one word of Latvian, so I'm very sorry. and this is my first visit to Riga. I am a sociologist who works as a criminologist in a law school, so I'm a bit of a mongrel, and I am involved in research, writing, public engagement and teaching about the problems of hate crime and hate speech for about the latter decade and a half now. And I've got half an hour to share some of my experiences with you. And I've just realised that I have lost the time from there, so if Angelita will keep an eye on the time for me, thank you. I'd like first of all to say that I'm deeply honoured to be invited to speak to you today, so I express my gratitude to the Latvian Centre for Human Rights. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to attend and to share my understandings with you. And I hope that you will be at least happy to hear my understandings for no more than half an hour. Before I get going, if I could just also share a brief personal note with you. That today's visit, as well as speaking at this important event, is a very important personal journey. I've taken a day's holiday tomorrow. My family will last in Riga. In fact, it was my father, Stefan Igansky. I'm not entirely sure about the history, but I think he was last in Riga in 1939 to maybe 1940. He was in the Polish 5th Airborne Division, 5th Airborne Regiment, stationed in Lida, and I think his squadron fled to Latvia, where he was interned. He died 25 years ago, so I can't talk to him about this, I'm afraid. I wish I could. He didn't tell me very much, but he told me that he was captured by the Soviets in Riga, and somehow, maybe in 1941, he ended up in Murmansk after a journey with the Soviets. He never shared what happened on that journey with me, apart from one or two moments that as a boy were terrible to hear about. And he was one of the fortunate ones. He was handed over to the British and ended up finishing World War II in the Royal Air Force. So it's especially an honour for me to return, if you like, to Riga. Just on that personal note, before I get going, I'm trying to find the story of this journey, so if there's anybody here who knows about this history, please talk to me over coffee or over lunch. I'd be very grateful indeed, because I'm trying to find out. So, back to business. The topic of my presentation is how hate hurts. I've been working in this area, focusing mostly, even though I'm a sociologist, focusing mostly on the social psychology of victimization, the impacts of hate crimes upon victims and victimized communities, and why that's important to understand. I've also worked with offenders, talked to many offenders, and to think about what motivates them and what impels them. And I want to share both sides with you today in my presentation. To start, just on another slight personal journey, but there's a point here, a professional point to make in terms of my presentation. Earlier in the year, I was in Brussels, and I sat down for dinner in a restaurant in the evening, and I noticed there were 3 armed guards standing at the door. I couldn't miss them, in full police uniform with huge guns, defending the restaurant door. I wasn't in the heat of a war zone. It was a cold March evening in the Belgian capital. And my dinner companions were 24 or so colleagues who were attending the Facing Facts conference in Brussels, organised by a Jewish organisation, CG. And this conference was about taking a victim-centred approach to hate crime. Earlier in the day, we were discussing about supporting victims of hate crime and encouraging reporting. Now in the evening, with the guards at the door, I was very mindful of how we ourselves were potential targets of hate crime or hate violence ourselves. And I thought about what the odds of our survival would be if what the restaurant owner who organised the guard came to pass. Very little, I thought our odds were. Now, the restaurant owner was a former senior police officer in Brussels, taken early retirement, and he insisted on arranging the guard at his own expense when he heard that the dinner booking was made by a Jewish organisation. On leaving the restaurant, on seeing that one of our party was wearing a kippah, a Jewish head covering, the restaurant owner advised him not to wear it in the city, in case he himself was a potential target of hate crime. Thankfully, though, we enjoyed our dinner in peace, and I also left Brussels in peace. Others have not been so fortunate, as you will probably be very well aware. Just a quick review. In Brussels in May last year, a gunman shot dead 2 men and a woman, seriously wounded a 4th person in an attack on the Belgian capital's Jewish museum. This year in Denmark, a couple of weeks before our dinner, a gunman killed 1 man, injured 3 others in an attack on a free speech debate in a cafe in Copenhagen. In a second shooting in near Copenhagen's main synagogue, some hours later, a Jewish man was killed and 3 police officers wounded. Just over a month before the Copenhagen shootings, 12 people were shot to death in Paris in early January in 2015 in the attack on the offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. And 2 days later, during a siege of a kosher supermarket in Paris, 4 hostages, all Jewish, were killed. Now, occasional high-profile incidents of extreme hate violence, such as these in Europe, occur against a backcloth of rather more frequent, in fact exceedingly frequent, rather more routine, everyday violence in which prejudice, hate, or bigotry plays some part. Elsewhere in the world, if we look beyond Europe, hate violence, resulting in many fatalities, has had very extreme consequences and profound impacts upon the communities affected. So, in the rest of this keynote address, I want to briefly unfold 2 particular consequences of this hate violence if we look at it from a global perspective. First, I want to consider the spatial psychosocial consequences of hate violence. At the everyday, the extreme hate violence, so all levels, and locally and globally, which I argue, if we think about it, hate violence is a major global public health problem. First of all, just very quickly, just so that I can get my terms right, what is hate crime? I know you have a definition in your pack here, the OSCE ODIHR definition. Essentially, we can think of hate crime as crimes in which hostility, prejudice, or hatred against some aspects of the victim's identity, such as their race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, skin colour, religion, or a disability they might have, play some role in the offence, either as a motivating factor or as an aggravating factor, if not the main motivating factor. So essentially, to represent it simply, hate crime is a pre-existing criminal act in a country. These crimes already exist: violence, threats, property damage, for instance, to take some of the main crimes. Add in the dimension of hate motivation or aggravation with hate, prejudice, or bigotry, and that has come to be known as hate crime. First of all, the spatial impact of hate violence that I want to offer some reflections about. Well, a 2008 study, I think a very important study, published by a civil society organisation, the Latvian Centre for Human Rights, no less, described how the spatial mobility of hate crime victims, people's movement around town, is affected by hate violence. The Latvian Centre for Human Rights, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this study, Angelita, carried out focus group, in-depth qualitative work with victims and discussed with victims about their experiences and the impacts. And those people who've been on the receiving end of hate violence or hate crime were giving accounts that showed how their movements were confined in town by seemingly avoiding risky places to avoid victimisation again. Now, given that many attacks, in fact most incidents of hate crime, occur in public places, the confinement for people can be profoundly limiting. Now, if you yourself have been a victim of a crime in a particular area, you might appreciate that kind of spatial impact that it has on you. You will think twice, or at least be cautious, before going to that place again. And the spatial impact of hate violence not only affects the direct victims, the person who is on the receiving end, other people who share the same social identity as the victim, perhaps their race, ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their religion, etc. Other people who share the same social identity could be family, friends, neighbours, other people who live in the neighbourhood, even elsewhere in the country, who come to hear of this violence, can suffer the same form of intimidation, the same form of intimidatory impact, and likewise take avoidance measures. Some members of targeted communities tell me, and have told other researchers, that they carry mental maps in their heads of no-go areas of town. They will understand that hate violence is not personal. Individuals are not attacked because of the persons that they are, but they're attacked because of what their identity represents to the attacker. This means that they realise they could be attacked again. They could be next again. This means that those people who share that identity realise they could be next too. So the consequences can be profound. In some cases, whole countries can be no-go areas. Let me return to the case of Jews in Europe, for instance, as an example, seeing as I started off with that. In 2012, the year when an Islamist extremist killed 3 children and a Jewish teacher in a school in Toulouse, 2,000 French Jews emigrated to Israel, many in surveys citing the threatening climate in Europe. The following year, that number grew to 3,000 French Jews emigrating to Israel, 2013. Last year, 2014, 7,000 French Jews migrated to Israel, and it's estimated that at least 9,000 French Jews will leave France this year. As a consequence, many of them saying as a consequence, because of this climate of hostility and violence. And it looks like that estimate is unfortunately about to be reached. It adds up. Think about it. Within the last 4 years, 7% of France's Jewish population has emigrated to Israel. Quite a lot. 5% has emigrated to London, basically London. And London's not a safe place for Jews either. Let me just move beyond Europe and away from the problem of anti-Semitic incidents. Elsewhere in the world, beyond our relative social stability that we enjoy in Europe, hate violence has had even more profound impacts and spatial impacts and claim many lives. The phenomenon has a long history, as many of you probably will be very well aware. But even in recent years, there have been numerous episodes of large-scale killings around the world in which denigration of the victims' identities and violent mobilisation around ethnic and religious identity in particular has played a role in violence. Such violence has led to people fleeing en masse areas of victimisation, as we are acutely aware of now with our refugee crisis, and hate violence has played a major role, not the only role of course, but a significant role in the fleeing of communities. When hate violence is perpetrated in regions of conflict, the spatial impacts can occur on an absolutely massive scale. Now, in all situations of mass conflict, in wars and civil wars, the impact of violence is not confined to the combatants, to the armed combatants. Civilian populations too suffer profoundly as human collateral damage. As the current violence in Syria and the flight of people from the country starkly shows. But when we have conflicts motivated by racial or ethnic conflict, where such violence plays a role in intercommunal conflicts, civilian populations are not collateral damage, they are the target of damage, the target of attack. They're not just accidentally caught up in the violence. They're indiscriminately targeted because of their identity. And whilst numerous types of violence can constitute crimes against humanity, hatred has played a very prominent role, as testified by the violence in Rwanda, for instance, Bosnia, and more recently in Iraq and Syria. The targeting of women in sexual violence has also been particularly characteristic in such conflicts, used to intimidate, inflict terror, and ethnically cleanse. Most recently, the spotlight of the world's media has been on the consequences of the atrocities committed by so-called Islamic State extremists in Iraq and Syria. But, less well reported by the international news media has been sectarian violence in Myanmar, or formerly known as Burma, between ethnic Arakanese Buddhists and Rohingya Muslims in Arakan State, which in 2012, according to the Myanmar government, claimed 200 lives. Human Rights Watch estimated many, many more. In the 2 years following, so 2013-14, very recently, 87,000 people fled Myanmar for other countries, for Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Australia. And in a story that's very familiar to us, 1 or 2 years later, those countries closed their borders and tried to resist the refugees and the migrants from that explicitly ethnic violence. Again, in a story that's very familiar to us recently for the news reporting of the refugee crisis, many of those refugees from that conflict were transported by smugglers in cramped conditions, many dying of the deprivations of the journey, many from violence by smugglers. Bangladesh closed its borders, returning Rohingya asylum seekers to the sea. Thailand also resisted. Elsewhere in Southeast Asia, in 2013, communal violence between Hindu Jat and Muslim communities in Uttar Pradesh claimed many lives, many injured. In that occasion, 50,000 people were reportedly fled the violence elsewhere. Now, I could go on and on and on, but my key message is the spatial impacts of hate violence occur on a global scale. We see these global movements of people, but also even in our own neighbourhoods, where we live, in our own cities. We can see the spatial impacts of people perceiving risky areas, wanting to avoid victimisation. Well, it's well known that there are multiple negative impacts of people who are fleeing conflict. And one of the well-known impacts, it's widely recognised that displaced persons are more prone to mental health and psychosocial problems. And I'd like to focus on those now very, very shortly. And in fact, in the case of hate violence, those people who are fleeing violence that's carried out on the basis of hate violence have a double effect, because it's also well known that research that myself and colleagues and others around the world have been undertaking, that hate violence itself has particularly negative emotional and psychological impacts. I must say you're doing very well in listening to me, far better than the students I talked to. I reckon I've got about 10 minutes left. Is that right, Angelita? Okay, so thank you. So well done, and now I need maximum attention for the last 10 minutes. So the psychosocial impact of hate violence. You know, all violence hurts. All crime hurts. All crime involves an injury of some sort, whether that's a physical injury, a financial injury, or an emotional injury. In fact, with all types of crime generally, there is an emotional injury. But the evidence shows, and it's absolutely irrefutable now, some years ago, certainly in the United Kingdom, people took some convincing, especially those working for criminal justice agencies, took some convincing about this evidence, but they're now fully convinced, they've seen the evidence, that hate crimes hurt more, they inflict particular emotional and psychological impacts, and that is why we share a particular concern. Probably that is why we are all sat in this room now, because we understand the particular egregious impacts of hate crime and hate violence. All crimes hurt, but there is something else, something additional to hate violence and hate crimes. It can be more harmful. As I've said, in the case of hate violence, there is evidence to show specifically that the emotional and psychological harms can be greater. Now, whilst the pattern of difference is not consistent for every individual victim, people are different, so the way we react to crime will depend upon people and our individual sources of resilience and our own differences, personality differences. But if we take the law of averages, if we look at the average, then it's very clear that hate violence hurts more when we think about the emotional and psychological measures. The emotional and psychological impacts. This illustration there is really just to illustrate the point, and I have taken an amalgamation of data to produce this illustration from various surveys. Most of my research has been with the British Crime Survey, now known as the Crime Survey for England and Wales, also the US National Crime Victimisation Survey, long-standing victimisation surveys. I'd be very interested to hear if you have a victimisation survey in Latvia. Very powerful surveys for estimating the true extent of crime, because as we all know, most crimes are underreported. Unless you have your car stolen, when you report that for the insurance. But most of the crimes are vastly underreported. Crime surveys measure a more true and more accurate extent of crime. In the British Crime Survey and the US National Crime Victimisation Survey, those people who say that they've been victimised in the last year are asked a whole battery of questions, and some of those are about the psychological and emotional impacts of hate violence. Don't worry, I'm not going to go on for hours about this, just give you the headlines about what the evidence shows. As I said, the pattern of difference is not consistent for every single victim, but on average it's clear that hate violence hurts more when the emotional and psychological impact is considered. Victims of hate violence are more likely to report emotional and psychological symptoms. So, for instance, victims of hate violence are more likely to report higher levels of depression and withdrawal, higher levels of anxiety and nervousness, loss of confidence, anger, increased sleep difficulties, higher levels of sleep problems, difficulty concentrating, reduced and feelings of safety. In short, the evidence clearly demonstrates that if you compare hate crime victims against victims of otherwise motivated crime, hate crime victims are more likely to report symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Far more likely to report symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Bear in mind, there are differences, of course, but on average, on the law of averages, it's clear. You know, you might think that the type of crime makes a difference. It's an obvious thing to say. Surely, somebody who's been the victim of a physical attack is going to demonstrate more of these symptoms than somebody who's verbally abused in the street. Actually, it's incredible. The evidence shows otherwise. We couldn't believe it. Researchers working on this, we tested and tested and tested, compared it with US data, compared it with British data. In fact, the psychological and emotional impact of getting a punch on the nose to being called a name on the street is just the same. Control for crime. There's a difference between hate crime victims and otherwise motivated victims, and the difference holds, irrespective of the type of crime, which indicates it's the sentiment behind the crime that hurts, the sentiment, the message. And consequently, sometimes people refer to these as message crimes. It's the message that hurts. What is it? What's that message? Well, the message that victims, if they will talk about it, will convey and will share is that victims of hate violence and those around them who share their social identity perceive their victimization as an attack upon the core of their identity, the very essence of their being. Hate violence can be seen to be sending a message to the victim and those who share their social identity that they are devalued, unwelcome, despised, denigrated. As victims of hate violence are attacked because of their social identity, as I've already said, this message is not personal, but it's targeted at their identity characteristics. Some people will try to manage their visibility, conceal aspects of their visibility if they can, just like the restaurant owner in Brussels said to one of our party to take his kippah off to avoid victimization. Many victims, if possible, will try to conceal their identity. But of course, many won't be able to. Now, this terroristic impact, hate violence has a terroristic impact because those who share the social identity of the victim, even though they might not have been involved themselves, directly targeted, realise they could be next, they're a potential target, and this post-traumatic stress type effect spreads across communities. Community surveys demonstrate this. Some refer to this as a ripple effect. I'd rather see it as a wave or a tsunami, essentially, of the impacts, especially when we think about this on a global scale. And in the study of hate crime victims in Latvia that I mentioned earlier, the profound and long-lasting impacts were drawn out by the research. Some of the victims in that research said that they felt powerless. They felt powerless on a constant state of alert and insecurity against further attacks, making quick calculations of safety and danger. Those of you who've been subject to personal violence in public places for any reason will probably be aware of this. From there on in, even before then, if you've heard stories of violence, you will make quick calculations, often below the level of consciousness, about where is safe and where is not safe to go, and at particular times of day and night. The best time for me walking in areas, I've reckoned, is 9 o'clock in the morning. I feel the safest walking in most areas in the UK at that time. Not all areas, but most areas I've worked out. We make these quick calculations. Hate crime victims, and this came out in the Latvian study, the small Latvian study, talked about these quick mental calculations they're making in everyday lives, weighing people up around them, looking at people around them, thinking, who might be a potential perpetrator? Could they be a potential target on the subway, on the tram, in the bus, whilst walking in the street, in the shopping mall, etc.? Now, to finish off, and this will probably be 2 minutes, is that okay? Okay. What's the significance of understanding the greater hurts and harms? This is not just an academic exercise, important though that was to gather the evidence, because many people needed a lot of convincing about this. And now, sadly for us academics, the Ministry of Justice in the UK now do this research themselves And when they saw our research, they've taken this task away from us and the money, and they're demonstrating this themselves, and the criminal justice system in the UK clearly accepts this, and in the United States as well. What's the importance of this? Well, it's more than an academic exercise. First of all, I would argue, and those working with victims argue, that understanding the unique particular impacts of hate crime is important. Those working with victims and victim support obviously need to address the needs that are common to all victims. All victims of crime have a set of common needs, irrespective of the crime. It varies for the individual, of course, because we're all different human beings. There are common needs. But over and above that, for hate crime victims, there are particular needs because of these particular hurts and consequences. That's the first thing that needs to be acknowledged and recognised and dealt sensitively. And then, of course, depending upon the particular social identity that you share, if you are gay, if you're from a particular religious community, if you are disabled, then there will be additional needs related to your social identity. This understanding, and for any there of you, counsellors working with victims, I very much appreciate it if you talk to me over coffee or over lunch to share your understanding. These needs are critical for important supportive work with victims. Secondly, it's actually been used for additional punitive measures for hate crime victims. This is recommended in it's part of the European Union directive and in a number of nation states. Hate crimes are awarded higher penalties upon conviction. Hate crime offenders awarded higher penalties upon conviction compared with the underlying offence. So the hate element of it attracts a greater penalty. The justification for that is not because we don't like the sentiment. There's a nod to free speech grounds there, that hate crime laws are not about criminalising speech or criminalising opinion. Very basically, hate crime laws give greater penalties for the greater hurts involved in hate crime. That's how the criminal law works anyway. If somebody murders somebody, they might get life imprisonment compared to a fine in the UK for an assault on the street. The different seriousness, according to the criminal justice system, attracts a higher penalty. That's the justification for the higher penalties for hate crime offenders. It's not about speech or the sentiment, it's about acknowledging and recognising all this evidence about the extra hurts. What that means is targeting resources. We need resources to support victims, to particularly support victims, and NGOs, civil society organisations in particular, have a wealth of experience, first-hand experience of working in this area. Many individuals working for those organisations have been victims themselves and have their own experiential understanding. It's important for awareness raising. We have colleagues doing work in schools, trying to raise the awareness of young people about the impacts and consequences of their language and behaviour. With the great hope, and I think perhaps they're rather more optimistic than occurs practically, but in the hope that some people might think twice if they understand the full consequences of their behaviour. It's a great principle to work with. And finally, working with offenders. Many would argue, as myself, as I would too, that, when we look at offenders, and, this really is the uncharted territory in the area of hate crimes, of what motivates offenders, what impels offenders. I think there's a notion that most hate crime offenders, most racist offenders, for instance, are paid-up neo-Nazis, extreme bigots, extreme haters, who target people in premeditated attacks. The reality is far different. And those of you who work for law enforcement, those of you here who perhaps are police officers or work for probation services or for judicial services, will probably well know that most offenders are people like me, who look like me, other people in the room. Most offenders are ordinary people who have very ordinary lives, But often most offenders have disturbed and troubled lives. More disturbed than mine, probably. And we can understand the context, the background to their offending in the context of their lives. Many offenders, this might be sensitive for some of you to hear, but many offenders are troubled people. Many offenders are hurt people themselves, carrying the hurts from their lives, various hurts, social disadvantages, personal disadvantages, who don't have the cognitive or emotional skills other than to lash out with violence or with their tongue when they feel they have been wronged, disrespected, insulted. You and I might have the intelligence to back away or to give a sarcastic remark. Other people don't, and their fists and their tongue are their only resource. Now, in my local area in Lancashire, there is a scheme who works with offenders, who talks through this evidence about the impact of what they've done upon victims. They don't get them together with victims. That's deemed to be too sensitive for the victims. They work with professional counsellors and mediators who talk through the type of evidence that I've just gone through in a couple of minutes with you, who talk about the harms and impacts to try and raise and generate the empathy of offenders. Experimental research, and some of my own experimental research, when you can compare those offenders to those who've gone through the courts, shows that it looks like it works. But there's a long way to go yet in understanding this and working with it, and we're just at the beginning. So I think I should stop there with a final word to say thank you very much for your attention. You've done very well, far better than students I talked to. And thank you again to the Latvian Centre for Human Rights for inviting me.
Paldies.
Thank you very much to Poligansky. It seems that we have a coffee break scheduled, but I would like to use the opportunity and give an opportunity for questions if you have some. I also think that it is very topical for the Latvian context as well. We often talk about crimes, but we often forget about victims. And if we look at the context of the European Union in general, we are one of the 5-6 EU member states which does not have a nationwide victim support organization. And only this year, this is the first time in the period after we have regained the independence, the state is funding the social rehabilitation service for grown-ups who are victims of hate violence. This is demanded by the EU directives and our international commitments when we speak about the human trafficking, human smuggling victims. But since 2006, we have the victim compensation mechanism, and victim compensation exists in Latvia thanks to the directive of the EU Commission. And still, in 24 years, finally, we have found the political will and finally have come to the conclusion that victim is also important and the state needs to support victims. This is just the background of Latvia for you. Poligansky mentioned the research from 2008, which is available in English and in Latvian in the Latvian Human Rights Office homepage, Latvian Center for Human Rights homepage, But unfortunately, many of these people, because of the environment here, have left Latvia. Now you have an opportunity to ask questions. And the microphones need to be given to the people who would be asking questions.
Paul, do you have any overview of which social groups in Latvia are mostly exposed to hate violence, and also in comparison with the rest of Europe? Are there the same tendencies or maybe something different?
Okay. I was fearing I might be asked. I think my understanding is limited. As I appreciate, I think the data are limited in Latvia. What I can see from the evidence of reports is that I am sure there is a vast amount of under-reporting of hate crimes. For many, many reasons. You will all know this. Victims of all crimes don't report them to the police, and especially hate crime victims. They think they might not be believed. They think they might not be taken seriously. They think nothing will be done. And this accounts often called secondary victimisation, if victims report these things to the police and nothing is done. What I can say for sure, that if you forgive me for saying this, there will be many, many, many hate crimes in Latvia that are not reported. And being a guest in your country, I can absolutely say that for sure. My reasoning for that is that if I look in the UK, the British Crime Survey estimates that, and these are scientific estimates, scientific survey estimates, that about 4 times as many hate crimes occur every year than are reported to the police. 4 times as many. It's about the same in the United States, and that for me is a rough guide, at least. And these are countries that have very well developed criminal justice approaches to hate crime and victim support approaches for many, many, many years. Hate crimes are vastly, vastly underreported. Within that, you will have particular groups, particular communities who are even more likely to underreport. If we take the problem of disability hate crime, for instance, evidence is showing, this is kind of the most recent recognition of the problem of hate crime, if you like. And I believe that when you consider the number of people with disabilities in society, it's probably the most prevalent form of hate crime, certainly in British society. Thinking the number of people that are disabled and the number of incidents of disability hate crime that we find reported in the British Crime Survey. But in many European countries, it's barely acknowledged, barely addressed that people with disabilities can be victims of hate crime. Also, if we take crimes where people are targeted because of their sexual orientation or their sexual identity, for instance, then of course the climate in different European countries is different in terms of the acceptability and recognition. There will be different levels of underreporting. So I'm very sorry, that's an academic answer to your question.
Jā, vai ir vēl kādi jautājumi?
Any more questions, please? Maybe speaking about the Latvian context a little bit, because we mentioned the data. Officially available data are the ones provided by the security police. These are, this is the crime which is motivated by racial beliefs. In recent years, we have only 2-3 crimes of this type reported, but there is no ground for illusions because we know instances about foreign students from Asian countries suffering here. These were Indians, Pakistani students, also Roma people. And the NGO Mosaic has documented homophobia cases and crimes of homophobia, and I think that there were 18 instances of these crimes, starting from the verbal abuses up to the attacks. So let's not be trying to soothe ourselves by statistics we have. It's really underreported. Let's be realistic. We have such instances. And we also need to acknowledge in the NGOs that we somehow were not able to encourage people to report, and sometimes we have come to know of the facts which have been belatedly known, and people hesitate to go to the police and report to the police. We try to make them go and report to the police, but sometimes victims want differently. We have to find the ways, even in the cases when people don't want to report to police, their cases are still somehow known and recognized. We have invited the foreign students to this conference. The number of foreign students grows in Latvia, and last year we had the Stradiņš University, medical university in Latvia, survey which indicated to the problems in Latvia, and we hope to have support from German and Swedish students because they have more understanding of hate crime and the instances of hate crime and how they are recognized. And this will encourage students and somehow educate Latvian local students about these matters. Without the foreign student support and help, we would not be able to accomplish this completely.
Briefly, forgive me. It might be useful to know that in a country such as the UK, a population of 60 million people, the British Crime Survey estimates 200,000 hate crimes each year. 200,000 out of a population of 60 million. That will give you an idea. 1 in 20 of all crimes is a hate crime, according to the British Crime Survey. This is the Ministry of Justice's own survey, not an academic survey. 1 in 20, 200,000. Population of 60 million. And there's no evidence to suggest that the UK is any more or less hateful than any other country. Forgive me.
No problem. So Xavier Land, I'm a researcher at University of Copenhagen. I have a question more specifically on the role of the media on the victim or the potential victim of hate crimes. Because I have been experiencing the situation in Copenhagen at the beginning of the year, and if there is one country in Europe where the Jewish community is mainly safe, it's in Denmark, it's historic. And I could see the kind of effect of the media. There was a kind of psychosis, especially outside Denmark, that started after the shootings. So there were kind of official declaration, for instance, from Netanyahu, saying that the shootings in Paris and Copenhagen was the proof that the Jewish community was not safe in Europe, while historically speaking, Denmark is safer probably than Israel for the Jewish community. And so my question is the following, that there is an impact of the media, kind of an echo chamber. So even if you are not victim of hate crime, just the fact to have media reporting in a certain way about hate crimes can be damaging for potential victims by increasing stress or kind of nurturing a collective psychosis. So my question is, do you deal with that aspect in your research? And do you have kind of some quick guidelines about how to communicate about hate crimes in a way that is not anxiogene, but still inform the public about the challenges? Thanks.
Okay. Well, there were many questions there, and I will try and be brief about that. First of all, with the guidelines, there are media guidelines about responsible reporting. And if you wanted to have a conversation with me afterwards, I could recommend some. But let me focus on the role of the media, because the key thing to consider, of course, is that hate crimes don't occur in a vacuum. They don't just happen. They occur in a cultural context. They occur in a context of the prevalence of all sorts of ideas and attitudes, ideologies, negative stereotypes. about difference, about other people. I grew up with these in the UK. I was socialised in a white working class environment. I went to school with young boys in a working class neighbourhood. In my mind now, right now, are all the racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, you name it, stereotypes that I was socialised into, despite working in a university for 20 years and teaching about this. They are still there in my mind. Hopefully, I never act on them, and they lay buried in my mind, but many people do act on them, and it's important to think about why do some people act on them, on these ideas, many don't. The key thing is that hate crimes occur in this context, in the context of all these attitudes, and the media are a major purveyor of these attitudes, first of all. So the media are very powerful because this is how we come to make sense of the world. But to directly address your question, yeah, the media also has a responsibility. The reporting of hate crime can also be very damaging. Actually, the word hate, I think, can also be very damaging. You know, it's very interesting to see that ODIHR, the OSCE, in their definition, don't use the word hate. They use bias or prejudice there. Why is this? It's perhaps because of a recognition that hate crime offenders, most of them, there are some, but most of them don't really hate the person on the receiving end of what they're doing. They're expressing everyday biases, bigotry, prejudice, stereotypes. That if we admit it, some of my students sometimes are brave enough to admit it to me, that they share these stereotypes. Many police officers, mostly policemen, that I talk to who grew up in the type of neighbourhood I grew up, share these notions with me and often feel relieved that we can talk this way to each other, that we have these ideas in our heads. The notion of hate crime, the label hate crime, has been very powerful for a victims' rights movement. It's brought us all together. It's been a very emotive banner, bringing us all together. It brings us all together in this room. But I think we need to be very careful in the way that we use this. Just very briefly, I'm reminded of a young police officer who spoke to me a few years ago. He was telling me he was interviewing a victim. He had his notebook and he said, "So you've been a victim of a hate crime?" Tick. And he said to me that the woman he was interviewing looked with horror and terror on her face and said, "So they hate me then, do they? My neighbour hates me." And this young policeman, I think maybe was using me for therapy to bounce back how he was disturbed by this. We need to be very careful of the language. Hate is a very severe sentiment. And many offenders share prejudices and the biases that we all share rather than hate. There are some extreme ones. And that's why, to come really back to the point of your question, media reporting of these incidents is very, very important in terms of the responsibility, and that the media don't generate a panic themselves and don't add to this climate of intimidation. And there are many recommendations for responsible ways of doing that. Okay.
Jā, es atvainojos, ka mēs jau...
I apologize for getting into your coffee break seriously, jeopardizing the coffee pause, but we can take 10 minutes from the next panel discussion and then continue with questions, and afterwards leave for the coffee break. Maybe return at 11:45.
I would like to ask question, maybe one comment and one question to the first speakers. Ms. Kamenska mentioned that something maybe must be done, that there is problem of underreporting and that people don't want to go to the police, yeah? But I think that there is a quite big problem, at least in Latvia, that there is somehow not understanding from the side of police. concerning these hate crimes. A representative from Minister of Interior mentioned that there is one project that started already this year between state police and OSC ODIHR, and there are already 2 events who have taken place. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more? What was the result of these seminars?
Par to runās Evita Lipno.
Evita Lipe from the State Police College will speak about it. She will tell us about the training. I think it would not be right to generalize and say this about all the police officers, but certainly there is inadequate knowledge, awareness. Very often people are talked out of reporting and writing a statement about the incident. We have heard about it, we have received reports, but we have to look hopefully to the future. Since we will have a representative of the police as one of our next speakers in the next session, but I fully agree with you that there is lack of awareness. This is why there is a need for training, but there is also lack of sufficient knowledge in the further phases of law enforcement, that criminal charges are in or cases are initiated, but they are subsequently dropped as the prosecutors and judges lack awareness. And in the discussion in the Parliament, in the legal committee, we had a discussion about every word in our formulations, since there is one questionable term, such as the hate crime, but there is also this possibility of having hate crime as part of or component of some other crime, and there is a lack of understanding of how to interpret these crimes in the Ministry of the Interior as well, and such current crisis as the refugee crisis has left us with limited resources for further research of this problem. But obviously, from your website, I realized that regardless of who this is, victim who is searching for help, or maybe someone who works in a law enforcement agency and needs additional information, anyone can access information and read about this. Anyhow, your organization is the one, or institution is the one which is responsible for the training chiefly. And one more question to Professor Igansky.
Insights and ideas. One question for you. To your mind, does such thing as a Holocaust denial fall into the scope of a hate crime, to your opinion?
That's a difficult question, and you know, if I gave a legal answer to this, of course it depends which country that you're in, and clearly it depends upon our jurisdictions, of course. In many countries, hate speech would be classified as hate crime. If we take the United Kingdom, for instance, the most common form of hate crime is what we call a public order offence, of somebody shouting something to somebody else in the street in a threatening or abusive manner, without violence. About 60% of all of our recorded hate crimes are incidents like this. In fact, about 60% of all crimes are incidents like this, and they mostly occur around bars and clubs, in the nighttime economy and at weekends. Public violence like this, which is speech only, speech which is threatening and has an intimidatory impact, which is not followed up with violence. Those incidents are prosecuted under the criminal law as public order offences, and if racist or homophobic slurs are used, they are prosecuted as hate crimes. It's the same in the United States. Even though they will say they are wedded to the principle of freedom of speech in the First Amendment, such crimes are also prosecuted as bias intimidation. Now, my point of saying that is, particular words have particular impacts. And my own personal view is that although most Holocaust denial is not expressed in everyday public encounters in the street, if we look at the particular context of some particular sentiments, the expression of some particular sentiments hurt, particularly hurt. And we can quite well understand why some particular things, some particular words hurt more than others. Some particular words do in the context of the history of the Holocaust. And therefore, there's a strong case for those jurisdictions that do criminalise Holocaust denial as hate crime for doing so. We don't in the UK, but they do in France, of course, and in Germany for various obvious reasons. So again, a roundabout answer, but I'd be interested in talking to you about that over coffee, if you like.
Laikam esam nopelnījuši kafiju.
So we have probably deserved, we have earned our coffee break now, and I would kindly ask you to come back in 10 minutes to 12.
I put your messy? Tā. Varam.
So we can resume work of our conference. And you are kindly requested now to take the handout from this survey of the Latvian Center of Human Rights. Unfortunately, this table is not available in the English version, but in the Latvian version there is a chart summarizing the statistics of hate crimes in the EU countries. And if you look at the table providing comprehensive data, and the data which are called good data, we can see that Croatia and Poland are included in this group, and in the section comprehensive data we see the Netherlands. This is the main reason why we have invited the representatives of Poland, Croatia and the Netherlands to this conference. This is not the first conference of its kind, and we've had visitors from other EU countries, namely the representatives of the police of the UK, Sweden, the Netherlands, and the achievements of these EU member states seems something out of reach here in Latvia. And sometimes it is useful to look at the experience of our colleagues in Eastern Europe, as in some EU countries the police training on hate crimes as well as collecting of the data is a recent phenomenon, and it may be useful for Latvia as well. Our first speaker will be Virginia Preis, who works in the Ministry of Interior of Poland. There is a team of human rights protection. In Polish, probably a different term is used for this, but since 2014, Ms. Preis is the coordinator of this team, and her job description involves monitoring of hate crime, coordination of training for police staff, cooperation with minority groups and the civil society, as well as with international organizations. And she herself takes part in the trainings as a lecturer, training the police staff as well as other state institutions and NGOs. Welcome, Virginia.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the coordinator of Human Rights Protection Team. It is a small unit which is situated in Polish Ministry of the Interior. This unit exists in the ministry since 2004. And its main tasks are connected with hate crimes, counteracting hate crimes. It is first of all monitoring cases which are related to hate crimes. Monitoring means gathering the information about such incidents and making some analysis on the phenomena in Poland. We also are engaged in educational actions in this field, especially for police officers. And from the other hand, we are also very strongly engaged in the cooperation with minority groups, with NGOs, some small communities, minority communities. We are also cooperating with domestic and international institutions and organizations that are, which deals with human rights and hate crimes. Apart from that, my team is also engaged in actions to ensure human rights observance by the police and by border guards, which means we are monitoring the cases of discriminating behavior of the officers, as well as human rights violation during the interventions. Today, I will focus mostly on two elements, two tasks of human rights protection team, which will be educational actions for the police, educational programs, and cooperation with minority groups. In the field of raising police competences in conducting investigations in hate crimes, Poland implemented a program of ODIR-OC. It is Law Enforcement Officer Program on Combating Hate Crimes. Now there is a new version of this program, which is Training Against Hate Crimes for Law Enforcement. Poland implemented this program in 2006. And since 2009, we introduced the system of trainings in the police. This is a system of vocational trainings on counteracting and combating hate crimes. And we managed to introduce a uniform national program, which is the same for every unit. The system is a system of cascade trainings, and those trainings are obligatory for all units, for all police units in the whole country. The trainings are addressed to the police officers who are or who could be directly confronted with hate crimes. As I already said, we started the trainings in 2009, and by the end of 2014, over 77,000 police officers had been trained within this program. The aim is to teach police officers some competences, which is identifying hate crimes, investigating properly, reacting adequately, and also preventing hate crimes, as well as behave adequately during the contact with hate crime victims. But apart from this knowledge, we also work on the attitudes of the officers. So we are trying to raise their awareness on the issue of discrimination, also of this kind of discrimination that can be performed by the police officers themselves. The trainings are conducted in cooperation with NGOs and minority groups representatives. For example, today there is one of such trainers from NGOs with us, Mr. Jacek Purski, who also will have a presentation later. He's one of the trainer in these trainings. He's cooperated very tightly with us and with the police on the issues of hate crime. The Ministry of the Interior is a coordinator of this program. We are analyzing the problems, and we are giving some recommendations on how to develop the didactical process and how to make these trainings more effective. As I already said, we have many police officers trained and very developed competences to combat hate crimes, but it's not enough to develop competences of the police officer to combat hate crimes, because there are also the second side of the problem. So we should also encourage victims to report to combat hate crimes effectively. Therefore, Ministry of the Interior cooperates with minority groups, with NGOs, to encourage them also to engage in the process of combating hate crimes and to report. This cooperation is first of all reporting to Human Rights Protection Team by the victims of hate crimes their cases directly, as we are including those cases in the monitoring and we are supervising afterwards the manner of acting by the police in these cases. But apart from that, Human Rights Protection Team also meets with minority groups, with NGOs, to discuss directly the problems that appears in this field of combating hate crimes, especially in the field of reporting to law enforcement. And on the basis of such meetings, of such communication, Ministry developed a project which was aimed to give the information to the victims or to the witnesses of hate crimes on how to report, to whom they can report. The project was called Immigrants Against Hate Crimes, How to Effectively Assert Your Rights. It was carried out mostly in 2014, and it was co-founded from the European Fund on integration of third countries nationals. This project was in fact a response for the needs expressed by the migrants and foreigners. They told us that still many people don't report hate crimes to law enforcement. And the reasons are very various. So the first reason is lack of information. So many people don't know even that hate crime is a crime according to the law. Secondly, even if they know that, they are not aware to whom they should report. They are not aware of the procedure of reporting. They don't know to which institution they should go with their problem. But apart from this lack of knowledge, there is also a mistrust to the police especially, and to public institutions also. The victims are afraid that they will be mistreated or that the police don't understand what happened to them. Then they won't be prepared to help them, or they also have no faith in effectiveness of Polish actions. Therefore, the main element of our project was the information campaign. Campaign was called Racism Certified. It was performed since March to June 2014. And as you can see, there is a poster which was popularized during the campaign. The campaign symbol is it's a racist bomb. The bomb is built by hate symbols and hate slogans, and it symbolizes hate crime, which can appear every time, every moment in the public space, and hate crime victim can meet it everywhere. Later, I will show you the TV spot of our campaign, where one of victim meets such hate bomb, such hate crime in the public space. The target group was first of all migrants, but as the campaign was present in the public space, and the procedure of reporting hate crimes is the same for everyone, also the message was also sent to other minorities that can meet hate crimes, and for the whole society. The goals were two. one of the goals were to inform, so to inform about what hate crime is and how to procedure with that, to whom report. The second goal was to encourage people to report hate crime to law enforcement and to send them the message that it is worth to report. The main channels of the campaign was, first of all, the website, reportracism.pl. The website includes meritorical information about hate crimes and about institutions who deal with hate crimes and about how to report hate crimes to those institutions and what to expect from them during the procedure. The website includes also the contact form, which is in use to report hate crimes directly to Human Rights Protection Team. Here you can see one of the parts of the website. This part is about the procedure of reporting, so people can find information about institutions to whom they can report and about the ways of possible reporting. Also, in the campaign, we were distributing leaflets which contained information about hate crime and reporting. As we hadn't an opportunity, a possibility to distribute them directly among foreigners, we cooperated with various entities which has a direct contact with migrants, which were first of all NGOs, but also universities and some public institutions who meet English. And going to the effects of the campaign, the first effect was a rise of hate crime reporting to Human Rights Protection Team. Since the beginning of the campaign till today, we still receive the high number of reporting of hate crimes. I told you that the campaign finished in June 2014, but the website of the campaign, including contact form, is still active, and the contact form is still in use, so we are still receiving the reports via this contact form. These reports are from migrants, but also from Polish people who found something in the internet and they wanted to report that. But there is also the second effect and the second success of this campaign, which was network building. We started the cooperation with many entities in the whole country who had a direct contact with migrants. Over 300 entities was engaged in the campaign in the leaflet distributions. And this cooperation is still continued. And as a continuation, there was a second step of the project, which was the conference. The conference took place in November 2014, and it was titled "How to Dismantle the Bomb of Hate, the Effective Cooperation of Immigrants and Law Enforcement." The participants of this conference were, first of all, those NGOs and those minorities, minority communities who cooperate with us during the campaign, but also representatives of public institutions. And the main subject of this conference was to continue the discussion about how to counteract hate crimes. So which should be the next steps, the next actions to combat hate crimes more effectively, and how to improve the cooperation between minorities and NGOs and public institutions. The key subjects were the barriers in reporting hate crimes and the solution to how to liquidate those barriers. We managed to elaborate a list of barriers during the common work, during the conference, and I tried to present it in within some thematical points. Those barriers are, first of all, lack of knowledge about hate crimes, about the procedure of reporting. But secondly, there are some fears of hate crime victims. So the fear of procedure, which is long-lasting, complicated, and needs the engagement of the victims on the particular levels of the procedure. There is also a fear of revenge from the part of the perpetrators. And there is also a mistrust to the police itself. Another barriers are some bilateral barriers. Language barriers, cultural barriers, and stereotypes. There are common stereotypes from both sides, from the side of migrant victims and from the side of police officers. There are also some factors connected with police officers' behavior. For example, their lack of cultural intercultural competences, a lack of empathy, formalistic behavior, lack of understanding. But there are also some factors connected with victims, which is first of all unregulated residence in the country. We also managed to build a long list of solutions. Here are the main points from this list. So the solution to liquidate the barriers in reporting hate crime is direct meetings and cooperation of migrant and public institutions, educational and mutual understanding, but this education concerns many entities. So it concerns, of course, police officers and public institution representatives, but it concerns also migrants. It concerns children in school, their parents and teachers, and it concerns also journalists and many other groups. And also there is a need to make some informational, educational campaign for the whole society. Another kind of solution is a need of multi-agency cooperation. We also identified the essential role of the leaders on the both sides. So there is a need to point out, to create leaders in minority groups who can be some ambassadors of their problems, of their needs in the contacts with public institutions. But there is also a need to point out some liaison officers in the police to contact with minority groups. As I said, one of the most important ideas which was identified during the campaign was to ensure the strong direct cooperation between public institutions and minority groups. And there was also an idea to create some working group which would include experts from Ministry of the Interior and from minority groups. And on the basis of this idea, we created such working group on counteracting hate crimes in the Ministry of the Interior. The participants of this team are the representatives of groups which experience hate crimes, NGOs, and from the other hand, the representatives of Ministry of the Interior and the police, and from other institutions. The goals is to facilitate the communication between the ministry and the minority groups, so providing information about the problems and needs of the minority on the one hand, and on the other hand, common work on the possible solution. The second goal is to design concrete and tailored actions aimed to counteract hate crimes and to deal with hate crimes and the problems of the minorities more effectively. The first meeting of the team is actually tomorrow, so we are very happy that this cooperation which started 2 years ago, in fact, that it is still developing, that is still evaluating. On this moment, over 40 NGOs and minority group representatives applied to this working group, so the interest is quite big. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions to me or would like to discuss or receive some more information about activities of Human Rights Protection Team, you can contact me on this email address. I also encourage you to visit our website, reportcases.pl. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. I think it would be maybe interesting for the people to get a sense how many hate crimes are reported, and well, in Latvia, in Latvia annually it's about 20 cases, about 19 would be related to incitement to hatred, maybe one to, violence. What is the sense?
Well, we cannot say on what is the real number on hate crimes in Poland. I can say about the official statistics, which are for 2014. According to the General Prosecutor's Office, there were over 1,000 proceedings. But there are not all of hate crimes, because General Prosecutor's Office is, in their reports on hate crimes include only a part of hate crimes. The Polish Penal Code is built in a specific way, because there is no hate crime definition, but there are some hate crime provisions which concerns a few sorts of hate crimes, let's say, but there are many other sorts of hate crimes which hasn't got the separate provisions in the penal code. So the reports of General Prosecutor's Office concerns only this part of hate crimes who has specific provisions in the penal code. So we cannot say, in fact, what is a real number and how big is underreporting, but we presume that it should be, that it is rather big, because the number of hate crimes is, the number of reported hate crimes is growing from one year to another. So that means that people are more and more aware of hate crimes, or of reporting hate crimes, of their rights as a victim of hate crimes. So this number registered is bigger and bigger, but we still have no idea about what is the dark number of hate crimes.
But I understand we should trust Paul, who said that it should be multiplied by 4. And then we get sort of some number, 4,000. I think in the Latvian case, probably when we have one case and multiply by 4, probably wouldn't be an accurate figure. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Un varbūt tie jautājumi tad pēc tam, ja, kad...
If you have questions, then please save them for the time after we have heard all the panel speakers. And now I would like to welcome Daniela Petkovic from Croatia. She is from the Police Academy. She is an assistant head of the academy, as well as responsible for international and interinstitutional cooperation. And from 2006, she is also one of those individuals who has been involved in the OSCE training about hate crimes, and she continues to share this practice in Croatia.
I need to congratulate to Latvian Center for Human Rights for organizing this conference on such an important topic. I believe that we must never stop talking about human rights, and hate crime is about human rights. So I'm really glad to participate at the conference and to have an opportunity to share with you Croatian experience when it comes to the combating and preventing hate crime. So a few words of my introduction. My name is Daniela Petković. I'm assistant head of the Police Academy for International and Interinstitutional Cooperation. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm chief police advisor, also national trainer for the hate crime within the Ministry of Interior. In the first part of my presentation, I will briefly outline how hate crimes entered into the Croatian criminal legislation and what has been done on the national level. And secondly, I will talk about the police-NGO cooperation in combating hate crimes. So in 2006, the definition of hate crime was introduced into the criminal code. And this definition prescribes that or defines hate crime as a criminal offense committed on account of person's race, color, religion, national or ethnic origin, disability, gender, sexual orientation, that's the new definition. So in 2006, hate crime was defined as any crime committed against, out of hatred against another person based on such person's race, color, gender, sexual orientation, language, religion, political or other conviction, national or social origin, property, birth, education, social status, age, health status, or other characteristics. I need to say that the reason why this definition entered to the Croatian Criminal Code was partly the result of the efforts of two LGBT NGOs, Iskorak and Kontra, who pushed, who worked on this definition and in a way tried to influence and to put the pressure on the Croatian parliament. And they have representatives of national minorities who supported this idea. And because of the, in a way, international pressure, and because we need to fulfill all benchmarks towards EU accession, fortunately this definition entered finally to the criminal code. In 2013, a new criminal code was adopted, and the definition of hate crime now is slightly changed, slightly deferred. It's not so open as it used to be. So hate crime is defined as a criminal offense committed because of race, color, religion, national or ethnic origin, disability, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity of another. This, of course, means unless more severe punishment is explicitly prescribed by this law, hate crime should be considered as an aggravating circumstance. So it could be or aggravated or qualifying circumstance. And we have several criminal offenses where law prescribes the offenders should be punished more severely if they are committed out of hatred, such as aggravated murder, then bodily injury, serious bodily injury, then provoking riots, female mutilation, and so on. What is very important is the fact that our law also recognizes gender identity as one of the grounds of discrimination, and it was important to say that above mentioned cases, criminal offenses, cover criminal offenses committed not only against a person but also against property. By that time in 2006, when the first definition of hate crime was introduced to our criminal code, we started with the training for the police. I will talk about it later on. But another important fact in the fight against hate crime was establishing of a working group for monitoring of hate crime. This working group was established in 2010, and the legal basis for establishment of this working group was found in two national strategic documents. Those were National Program for Protection and Promotion of Human Rights and National Plan for Fight Against Discrimination. Main tasks of this working group include analysis and monitoring of anti-discrimination legislation in relation to hate crime, then needs analysis of legal framework in regards to hate crime, coordination of all state authorities when it comes to hate crime prevention, but also when it comes to the collecting data on hate crime. Our group includes a wide range of key stakeholders, such as representatives of the Ministry of Interior, representatives of State Attorney's Office, and representatives of Ministry of Justice, because we believe these three institutions are key stakeholders when it comes to the fight against hate crime. But also within the working group, we have representatives of the municipal court, higher misdemeanor court. We have representatives from Ombudsman Office, from the civil society, from the NGOs, and from the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs. Government Office for Human Rights and Rights of National Minorities coordinates the work of the working group and provides the support for the working group. For us in the working group, it was very important to include legal practitioners, so representatives from the courts, because in that way we were able to, in a way, foresee some future steps that need to be taken to collect data more effectively. Because once the working group was established, it showed up that there is a significant lack in the coordination of all legal state authorities, all competent authorities involved in hate crime prevention and monitoring. This working group, for that purpose, this working group drafted a protocol or so-called rules of procedures in hate crime cases, and this protocol was adopted by the Croatian government in 2012. This protocol defines obligation and content of cooperation of all competent authorities. But what is very important that, according to the protocol, now we have tools for data collection and data monitoring. So appendix to the protocol is a table when we can track data provided by the Ministry of Interior, by the State Attorney's Office, and by the courts. Also, the aim of this protocol is to provide and to protect the possible hate crime victims. Here is hate crime statistics that we gather according to the protocol for every 6 months, and the Government Office for Human Rights and National Minority Rights is central body for collecting and publishing those data. So we have data provided by the Ministry of Interior about reported criminal offenses in total. We have data provided by the State Attorney's Office about the processing of those cases, and finally we have the number of final judgment with the sanctions imposed to the offenders. And the same goes when we talk about misdemeanors. It is also important to say that Office for Human Rights and National Minority Rights, as a coordinating body, also organize public campaigns, public events, and mixed training for all state authorities, which means for the police, for the prosecutors, for the judges, and representatives of civil society. And those trainings took part regionally, and the main focus is on LGBT ground and national minorities. Now, a few words about the training we do within the police about hate crimes, combating hate crimes. Similarly, like in Poland, in 2006, Croatia joined a law enforcement officer program on combating hate crime, originally designed by the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and now this program is known as TACKLE. We didn't just copy-pasted this program. Like in Poland, we adjusted it and tailored this program to the Croatian experience and practice. And we decided to take a train-the-trainers approach, because when it comes to the professional development, vocational training, and specialization of the police officers, we often use this train-the-trainers concept, because we believe it is more effective and less expensive. So main goal of the training was to raise awareness in dealing with hate crimes, increase law enforcement capacity for hate crime detection, investigation, and prosecution, and what was the most important goal, to establish cooperation and partnership among police and NGOs. We have four main sections within the training: introduction to hate crimes, responding to hate crimes, investigating hate crimes, and community wellness and recovery. And we were trying to cover the topics about how to recognize, how to understand hate crimes, what are the most common indicators for hate crimes. Then we talked about stereotypes, prejudice, social psychology of hate, typology of the offenders, of the hate crime offenders. We talked about hate crime legislation, standard operating procedures, managing crime scene, collecting evidence, hate symbols, graffiti, hate music, spreading hate through media, understanding of conflicts, mediating in community, and about the role of NGOs in combating hate crime. The training was delivered to all 20 police administrations we have in Croatia, because we wanted to have at least one experienced training for the hate crime in every of 20 police administration in Croatia. We took a kind of international, interinstitutional cooperation or approach in our training, because we, from the beginning, from the 2006, we were trying to have aboard all competent authorities, which means that representative of State Attorney's Office, representatives of Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, representatives of LGBT NGOs participated in our training as experts, as trainers from the beginning, and that is our policy till nowadays. So we really act together. and share experiences. We tried to have really practical training. We have a lot of case studies, role play. We introduced some new topics, such as mediating in community conflicts as a model of preventive police work. And we try to use a method of interactive, lived, experienced learning. So, as I said, we have participation from 2 LGBT NGO, Contra and Diskorak, just because they were those strengths who tried and succeed to introduce the definition of hate crime into the criminal code. They were talking about the role of NGOs in combating hate crimes, and that was extremely valuable because they were talking from their personal experience, and from the first time they were working together with the police officers. And all those police officers were experienced frontline police officers with many years of service. So that was really a new thing for all of them, but it showed as it was very, very good. So there are several ways how NGO can participate in combating hate crimes. That can be on observational or researching level, in reported criminal offenses, in preserving and collecting evidence, on counseling level, working with the victim, and in the rehabilitation of the perpetrator. What amazed all of us who were trainers for the hate crime were that after we finished our first training in June 2006 and the second one in June 2007, there was huge media interest about that, and suddenly everybody wants to speak to us about the training. We were interviewed on the television, on the radio, which was good because it helped us to raise awareness about the topic. And we always try to inform media about all our trainings, about all our campaigns and public actions, because we think that's very important. So it shows up that NGO and police have some common goals when it comes to the combating hate crime, such as establishing communication with trained police officers throughout the country. That was very important because, of course, it's much more easier when you know the person to whom you talk, so that those trainings enable for civil society, NGO activists to have to liaise with the police officers and to have direct connections to them anytime and anywhere. Then building up the platform of mutual actions against hate crime, improving the cooperation between NGO and police in detecting and investigating hate crimes, and of course most important was raising awareness on homophobia and LGBT rights as human rights. So how Ministry of the Interior implement the training for hate crimes within the police force? As I mentioned, we decided to take train-the-trainer systems. So till now we have about 45 experienced trainers through the police, trainers for the hate crime. Hate crime is integrated in the national police curriculum at all levels. When I say all levels, I mean on the level of the basic police training, which is program for adult education for the occupation of police officer. Then in the area of specialization, professional development of police officers, and also on the level of higher police education, which is in responsibility of the police college. Then through the additional specialized training carried out by the trainers in the police administration, In every police administration in Croatia, we have those trainers who are trained on the topic in the police academy. Then through roundtables and the lectures given by hate crime trainers, and there have been a significant number of such events during the years. Also through the cooperation between relevant state authorities in collecting, processing and disseminating data, especially through the work of the Working Group for Monitoring of Hate Crimes, and through NGOs police partnership at all levels, which has been accepted as our policy. Okay, good. So I will skip this just to mention that we have also General Police Director instruction to all the police how to conduct investigation on hate crime cases. We have track record, which means within the police we track every hate crime case from the moment it was identified as a hate crime until the final judgment was sentenced, and each case of hate crime is marked as urgent hate crimes. Now a few words about the police-NGO cooperation. From our first training in 2006, we established good cooperation with NGOs. We have several projects. One of them was Project Progress Together Against Discrimination to LGBTIQ persons in 2011, when several NGOs gathered together and financed by the EU funds held a project and conducted the training for 200 trainees at the basic police training on the LGBT rights as human rights, how to protect victims of hate crimes towards LGBT persons. Also, we had some additional trainings for the police. For instance, in 2011, after we have first Gay Pride Parade in Split, which is one city at the Croatian coast, beautiful city at the Croatian coast. But unfortunately, during this first Gay Pride, some unlucky events took place. There were some violence and a lot of cases of hate crimes reported to the police. So we, Ministry of the Interior, responded quickly, and we organized additional training for the police officers in this specific police administration. Another good project, example of good police NGO cooperation, is Project Preventing and Combating Hate Crimes Against LGBT Persons in 2013. This project was supported financially and technically by the Dutch Embassy in Croatia. And through this project, again, two LGBT NGOs, Iskorak and Kontra, together with the Ministry of Interior, held a public campaign about raising awareness on hate crimes against LGBT persons. We have posters and leaflets that were displayed on some at the main city squares in 4 capital cities in Zagreb. These posters were handed out to the citizens, and they were displayed in every police station. We also have press conference attended by the Minister of Interior, Dutch ambassador and LGBT NGO representatives. And this is one brochure, one leaflet that we handed out during the campaign, containing basic information about hate crime, some examples of hate crime, and the numbers of the police, medical service, and legal team of these two NGOs. Also, within the project, interactive workshops of LGBT NGOs, Contra and Diskorak, regarding hate crimes were delivered for the students at the police college. And this is now common practice because this is integrated within the curricula in the undergraduate study of criminal investigation that we have at the police college. So they have, every year they have interactive workshops under 3 modules: substantive criminal law, police psychology, and psychology of aggressiveness. As a part of all these projects, we also published some brochures. These brochures were distributed and published by the NGOs. And these are kind of guides for the police officers how to conduct, how to investigate, and how to recognize hate crimes. So we also provided these guides for our police officers when we have trainings. Okay, so unfortunately I don't have enough time, so just to wrap up, this was some experiences from Croatia. For everybody who wants to know more, please be free to contact me. These are my, this is my email address, and once I would like to thank Latvian Center for Human Rights for having me here and giving me opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for providing such a comprehensive view of the way hate crime issues are being dealt with in Croatia. I think I am generally impressed that you know, there's such a good tracking system. I hope it's working.
It is. It still needs to be. It's working. It still needs to be improved, but it's working.
I'm not. I think. Yes, we're supposed to finish, but we still have 2 speakers, but it's not that often that you know, people come such a long way, and I think with the developments in Latvia, you know, it is important that we give time to everyone, and I have decided, with your permission, hopefully, to do one thing after lunch. I was supposed to speak after lunch about refugees. If that is okay with you, we can slightly, you know, start our lunch a bit later, and then I give up my talking, and we start with a panel discussion a little later, because the lunch will start later. Vai tas ir, jums tas ir okay, kad man bija jārunā pēc.
I had to speak after lunch. I wanted to talk a little bit about our own experience, about monitoring on the internet, and about a little bit about the European background, taking into account the refugee crisis. But as we are lacking behind the schedule, we can start our lunch a little bit later and finish at 15 after 2. 15 minutes after 2. Now I'm giving the floor to the next speaker. So we don't have only the police representatives, but also the player which has a very significant role in the whole picture, and this is NGOs, because due to them, sometimes the investigations really start. Saskia van Bond represents the Netherlands organization. The Netherlands has very interesting experience, I should say, because by working in the police, as I understand, if I understand correctly, they are an NGO.
Well, thank you very much, Annalita. Thank you for having us. Let me just find my presentation. Well, I represent two NGOs, in fact, two Dutch NGOs. I'm a researcher and a project manager with both. Article 1 and Radar are both anti-discrimination organizations. We have a slightly different focus. Article 1 is a national knowledge center. We do research at the national level, and we do several transnational projects. Radar is more of a victim support organization where people can come to if they experience discrimination. And Radar works at the regional level. Just to give you a quick impression, this is the Netherlands, slightly smaller than Latvia, but more inhabitants, I believe. And there are 10 police units in the Netherlands. They are colored and have a number in them. And the orange striped area is where Radar is active. We are by far the largest anti-discrimination agency. There are around 20 in the rest of the country. Both Article 1 and Radar have a long track record of working together with the police, especially Radar, which has worked with the police since the mid-80s of the last century. And today I'd like to tell you about one form of cooperation that Radar has with two police units. We are active as Radar in 3 police units, and in 2 of these we have been commissioned by these police units to do the case screening of police registrations in order to retrieve possible cases of discrimination. And I will explain how this works, and it's a bit technical, so I've tried to make a picture which helps explain. First of all, in the Netherlands, we do not use the term hate crime, but we always speak of discrimination. This also includes hate speech. I think it's not really relevant to discuss the difference here, but I'd just like to give you the idea of what we do. When police encounter cases, when cases are reported that might have a discriminatory element in them, a hate aspect, then they are supposed to follow a special procedure. For example, they should always file a report, and they should always discuss these cases with the public prosecutor. But I guess it's been mentioned before, hate crime cases or discrimination cases are not always recognized right up front by police officers. So often these are not registered as such in the registration system. But fortunately, there is a sort of backup system in every police unit which helps retrieve these cases, at least as far as they have been reported. Let me skip this to keep it shorter. The main thing to make this work is that there is lots of information put into the general database by police officers. BVH, what you see there is 10 police units, and in every police unit, this procedure is in place. All incidents that are reported are written down by police officers in BVH, which is the general database. It's a process management tool. And lots of information is put in there, files are added, all sorts of documents. And once every few weeks, this database is searched at the level of the police unit by means of a query. And this query consists of a list of words that might indicate that a case has to do with discrimination. So that could be Jew, or headscarf, or black, or gay. And this results in the middle list, it's supposed to be, that you can see. This contains all the results from this query. So every case where one of these words was mentioned will be in this long list, and all the attached documents will be there as well. And the next step is to cut out all the irrelevant information, because there are lots of irrelevant files there. So there is this person, who we call a case screener, who has to go through all these results in order to find which cases are truly about discrimination. And to give you an idea, in Rotterdam, in the Rotterdam Police Unit, there's 6,000 pages per month that have to be gone through by a person. And this person, the case screener, puts the relevant cases in a new document, which contains the cases that are truly about, or at least likely about, discrimination. It still has to be considered by the public prosecutor, of course. So we have this case overview of discrimination incidents, which include hate crime. And as I said, well, I haven't said it yet, in 2 police units, this case screening is done by radar instead of by a police person. In these 2 units, radar has been commissioned as an NGO to fulfill this task, and this means that 4 employees of radar have been appointed to do this. They have been investigated by the police to make sure they have no criminal record. They have had to sign confidentiality agreements, and they work as, well, police employees, really, when they do the case screening. And all this is meant to get a good picture of which cases should be treated as hate crime cases, should be treated as discrimination cases, because so many things are missed up front because they are not identified as such, while they are still possibly retrieved from the system. Let me just quickly zoom in on this case screening. There are really 2 purposes for this case screening. One is the operational purpose. The case screener lists all the relevant cases, and 2 to 6 times per year, this is different per police unit, there is a regional discrimination meeting. This is where a specialized police officer, a specialized public prosecutor, and a regional discrimination agency, like radar, get together and talk over these cases. I forgot to mention that the case screener prioritizes the cases, which is very important. So the cases that have been prioritized will be discussed immediately, and the public prosecutor will decide which cases are to be followed by criminal procedure. Also, which we think is very valuable, in this meeting, alternative actions are discussed, because for many incidents that are in the list, it might not be possible to prosecute. So in this meeting, it may be decided that in a case, for example, where 2 neighbors have been in a fight and one has abused the other one with a racist slur, that this may for some reason not be prosecutable, or and another solution may be that a community police officer will keep an eye on these neighbors, will go and talk to them, like more in a preventive way. These decisions can be made at this meeting. And also because the Anti-Discrimination Agency as a victim support organization is there, it can be decided that a certain victim will be in contact with, or the Anti-Discrimination Agency will contact a victim to explain to them why their case was not followed by a criminal procedure. So this is all integrated in one meeting. That's the operational goal. And also, once a year, all these case overviews from every police unit are sent to the national police, and they are used to make reports. The national report about discrimination. I'm sorry, I'm too soon. Well, as I said, radar has been hired to do this work, this case screening work, in 2 units. And instead of police officers themselves, there's this specialized NGO doing this work, and it works really well, actually. And it's not just me saying that, it's the police units who hire us.
they say that they think we do a really good job, a better job than they did themselves. And, well, it shows because the case overviews that are filled by radar screeners show many more incidents than the other units. For example, in the Rotterdam area last year, radar case screeners registered nearly 900 discrimination cases in this case overview, whereas in a similar area, similar police unit of The Hague, only 90 of these incidents were registered. So that's a huge difference. And we've also been told by the police officers commissioning us that since radar screeners do this work, this is the other police unit, that 25% of cases have received a different priority. And this is because radar screeners are specialized in discrimination. They are sensitive to things like bias indicators. They are sensitive to certain elements in these case descriptions, in all these files, that they may find sooner, identify sooner than any other person. We've also added, together with these police units that we work for, we've added another activity, because what I just showed you is like the general model of case screening, which is done in every police unit, usually by police officers themselves. But what we have added in the units that we work in is a direct feedback line, because radar case screeners often encounter cases that lack essential information in the registration system. For example, it might say that someone said racist words to someone else, but it doesn't say what words were said, which of course is essential. Such information is crucial. Another thing might be that a screener might see in the report of the interrogation that crucial questions were not asked to a suspect or to a victim, for instance, about the motivation of the perpetrator. And this kind of information, our case screener will contact our contact person in the police unit and say, well, we need this information is essential in order to treat this case like a hate crime, like the way it's supposed to be treated. And so this direct feedback line has another operational purpose, in fact. Well, this is far from perfect. We are still working on this together with the police to get this as good as possible. And at the national level, of course, there's a problem that there are regional differences. Because the police units where we work do it like this, but others have their own way of working. And in some police units, it's not highly prioritized at all. But the national police are working really hard at the moment to improve the registration of discrimination and to improve the case screening. And they intend to introduce a national model for doing this. And they've asked Radar to give our view on this, and I will actually be sending them our recommendations later today. So still lots to improve, but we are really happy about working with the police. We feel that we really complement each other. And I think, of course, in every country these things work differently, and this is very much the Dutch situation. But the key here is, I believe, that NGOs and police can really reinforce each other. That is our experience, at least. Thank you.
Very much. I must though say that your example is unique across Europe. But we are interested in hearing, not only good, but also best practices that exist currently. I am afraid that I have to switch to the last speaker. I apologize to. Es atvainojos, Evita,
I am sorry. I apologize to Evita. for leaving you so little time for your presentation, but it is important that Latvia has something to say finally, even though there is enormous amount of work ahead of us, but Evita will tell you more about this. She will tell you more about this OSC project, and she will also tell you about the past experiences, as this has not been paths of roses. And dear colleagues, I would like to share our experience of cooperation with NGOs. I am Evita Lipe, head of the department of the State Police College, and I'm also responsible for the issues related to hate crime. I would like to start by telling you about our cooperation with the Danish Human Rights Institutes. In 2007, I was involved in the training of Danish Human Rights Institute for the Iraqi police officers, and in 2009, the Danish Institute asked me to participate in this project. This project was implemented in the framework of a program implemented by the European Commission entitled Hate Crimes Against LGBT persons and their prevention, and a lot of training was provided in the educational institutions for the police as well. And when we started implementing this project, we started our cooperation with the NGO Mosaic. In 2010, the first two-day seminar was carried out. And 1 year later, in 2011, another seminar took place. A handbook was published in the framework of this project, and a brochure in the Latvian language was published as well. About 100 participants took part in both seminars together, not only representatives of the police, but also representatives from the prosecutor's office, ombudsman's office, the Judicial Training Center, other state institutions, and NGOs. It was a rather shocking experience. During the first seminar, many participants left the auditorium in dismay, but regardless of that, we continued our cooperation in 2012 with the financial support of the USA Embassy. We organized 2 more seminars on the theme of prevention and identification of hate crimes. We invited representatives from state institutions, from the Inspectorate of Children's Rights Protection, the Center of the National Curriculum Development, and others, because we also included the issues of including education about hate crime and discrimination in the curricula in schools. A little later, we organized a seminar, Identification and Prevention of Hate Crime, together with NGO Mosaic and others, and we trained social workers and the medical professionals in this area.
So all in all, we had 5 seminars, and after the seminars, after each of the seminar, we had offered an opportunity for the participants to evaluate the seminar, and the seminars were evaluated very well. They had all received 8 grades, and 80% of them, of the participants, said that this was a very useful training for them. Some of them mentioned that it was not that useful, And for example, one from the state municipal police, the policeman who was a rescue policeman, and so he motivated his answer by saying that he has to rescue everybody who is in water. We also had different topics: international law, law in general, the hate crime definition, concept, also offenders and the motivation for their offenses, psychological phenomena and the psychological consequences for victims. And in the second part, in the afternoon, the seminars, participants had two groups, working groups. One was investigators. The group investigators discussed all kinds of criminal and legal aspects. And then the second working group was police officers on administrative matters and also preventing of hate crimes. And in the end, the two groups met, and we had discussion with NGOs. And in some seminars, the discussions were very heated. Very interesting discussions we had, actually. This is a short, brief insight into our seminars. I would also like to mention that we had a very good trainers team, because the trainers included the ones from the NGOs, for example, offenders' profile and motives was discussed by the former head of the police, Mr. Valdis Voins. So we had very good trainers team. And on the last picture, at the bottom, you see also NGO representatives from the Jewish community, Zelda, Mosaika, and others. Within the project, we also developed the web page, Hate Crime LV, naida, noziegumu.lv. We also had an event with in cooperation with OSCE, and in 2014 we had the Memorandum of Understanding signed with the organization, and at the beginning of 2015 the work group started activities. I was head of this work group, and we prepared everything for implementation of the memorandum. We had to organize many seminars, and it involved a lot of work, and then we had a 3-day seminar in June for the trainers. And in general, we trained 18, all in all, trainers. NGO participants and trainers participated in this training, and also the people from the board of the prisons. And then we had also a seminar for the police chiefs. At the end of the seminar, everybody received the OSCE handbooks in Latvian. Another point I would like to mention is that all the training we had and the OSCE handbook publishing and all the topics from the OSCE handbook and main topics are included in the curricula for adult learning, informal learning, and also in police college. They learn according to these programs, and we have also concluded an agreement with the Latvian Center for Human Rights, and we also had the first visit to the Netherlands, where we learned about hate crime. We will continue our cooperation with NGOs, and we will implement many different projects. If you are interested on OSCE handbook in Latvian, you are very much welcome to write to me to my email address, and I will send it also electronically to you. Thank you for your attention. The situation I'm describing the situation now. Due to my fault, everything is due to my fault, not because of the presenters. We are now behind the schedule. We are in the lunchtime now. However, I would like to give an opportunity to the audience to ask questions to the presenters. If there are no questions, you can ask your questions during the lunch. But maybe some burning questions are still there in the audience, and you have an opportunity to ask them now. So this is our Nordic character. We are hesitating always with questions. Of course you have questions, I know, but as we are really behind the schedule now, let's go to have lunch. And then we start our seminar. If you are able to eat faster, if I may ask you, can you eat a little bit faster and come back in 45 minutes? And then we will start with a panel discussion. It will be guided by, the chairman will be Paul Rautseps, and we will not have the introductory speech, and then we will really be behind the schedule. Lunch is served at the same place where you had a coffee break.
Not a very